Didn't realize that.
Hang on, I have to mute myself.
Want to make sure they can hear us. Can you hear us?
Those of you remote, can you hear us?
Yes, hear you.
Cats?
Okay, good evening. It's 7 p.m. Welcome to the joint meeting of the Northborough Fire Station Building Committee, the Financial Planning Committee, and the Appropriations Committee. This joint meeting is being conducted in person and remotely, consistent with Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, relative to extended certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. All members of the Fire Station Building Committee, the Financial Planning Committee, and Appropriations Committee are allowed to participate either in person or remotely. The Act allows the Northborough Fire Station Building Committee, Financial Planning, and Appropriations Committee to meet in person and remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of the recording of the meeting may do so by going to the Northborough Remote Meetings on the YouTube via the link listed on the agenda. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. I'd like to start with a roll call. Appropriations.
Scott Rogers is here.
George Frankel is here.
Financial planning.
Excuse me.
Give Tim a chance.
I promoted Bob, but he turned it down.
Okay, no problem. To give Tim a chance to acknowledge.
Tim Kalin is here.
Okay. Financial planning.
Scott Stockman is here. Rob Babcock here.
Ken Picard here.
Susan Sartori here.
John Rapp is here. The Fire Station Building Committee.
Dawn Rand's here.
Chief Parenti.
Dan Brillhart.
Diana Nicholas.
Tom Reardon.
Mitch is here.
Thank you. Good. Okay. Before we begin and ask for public comments, I'd like to acknowledge the passing of Tom Spataro, a longtime member of the Financial Planning Committee. He died back in June, father of two, very involved with the town, passed at an early age of 57, and we will miss him. At this point in time, I'd like to see if there's any public comments.
JR has their hand up. You want to let him in?
Yes, please. Public comment? Please identify yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. John Ray, Financial Planning Committee.
Oh, hi.
I'm in Midcoast, Maine with very bad service, but I'm going to try to participate to the degree I can.
Okay.
Should I be in this? Should I be in this? I don't see myself as a member. Is this the right way to join?
Chief,
I can promote him.
stand by, John, 1 second.
Just see JR, I didn't know who it was. There we go. He's being promoted up. Okay.
All set?
He's coming up through it.
Thank you.
Good, John.
Apologize in advance
Oh,
for
welcome.
my lack of
Thank you. Good.
participation on this, but I'm on vacation and was not. I couldn't change it.
Good. Okay, thank you. Any other public comment? Hearing none further, we'll begin with the presentation. Fire Station Building Committee. Madam Chair, will you be leading off, or the chief, or HKT?
Oh, the chief loves to talk. Come on, it's always him. Don't smile, Janet. So thank you very much for inviting the Fire Station Building Committee to meet with Financial Planning and Appropriations. We really appreciate the opportunity to come in. The intent of tonight's presentation is to have our architects, HKT, do a presentation to give you an idea of how we got where we are, the building we're doing, the designs we had. We also have, obviously, members of the board here can answer questions you have. We also have our owner's project manager, who is online. Tim Alex and Todd Ashford are here, and they'll be presenting, discussing a little bit. And we also have part of our financial team in the back. We have our town administrator and our finance director who will be able to answer any questions. At this time, I'm going to turn it over. Amy, are you doing the presentation, or is Janet?
I'll be giving the presentation.
I figured. All yours.
Okay, let me just share my screen here and My name is Amy Dunlap. I'm with HKT Architects. I'm a principal here. Janet Slamenda is also a principal with HKT. We've been working with the town of Northborough since fall of last year. And since that time, we've done a number of public presentations to folks in Northborough, both community information sessions and then a number of different permitting bodies, design review, zoning board, planning board, conservation commission, and the select board. And we're happy to be joining you tonight to give you a little information on where we are in the project. The design process started out with program development. When we do space programming, we meet with the fire department staff. We first give them some questionnaires that ask them a lot of detailed questions about their operations and where they are now and where they see things moving in the future. And then we sit down and we have conversations with them about that. We tour their existing facilities. We get an idea of the types of equipment that they have, the spaces that they need, and we put that together in a table form outlining what they have for space needs. From there, we bring it into schematic design. We start to look at some floor plan options, and we start to look at what the building will look like three-dimensionally. And we presented some of those options to the Fire Station Building Committee. And once we narrowed down to the selected preferred alternative, we took that schematic design and we got our first cost estimate. At that time, it was a cost estimator that was part of the design team. As we moved forward in design, the next stage is called design development, and that's when we start to put more details into the drawing set. The engineers get more involved. They start to think about how things are going to be structured and built. And when we get through the design development phase, that's when we have another cost estimator join the team. So we have the design team's cost estimator, and then the owner and Colliers as the OPM, they have a cost estimator involved as well. And those two estimators look at the drawings and specifications at that point in time. They put together their cost estimates, and then we have this reconciliation process that goes on. We have an afternoon where we all get together. We talk about what they were seeing in the drawing sets. We talk about the quantities and the scopes, and they compare and make sure that we're all on the same page, that we're all seeing the same thing in the design, that they are understanding the scope completely, and that we're getting good numbers to cover what the project entails. When we went through that process, and the numbers that you're going to see tonight that Tim's going to present are based on that design development reconciled cost estimate. Right now, we're in the construction documents phase. We start to put even more engineering and architectural details, technical details together at this stage. We're about halfway through that phase right now, and we just last week sent the drawing set as it stands at the moment off to the cost estimators. Again, those two, the design team's cost estimator and Collier's cost estimator, so that they can do another cost estimate. That will be the number that we will have to go forward to town meeting this fall based on a reconciled cost estimate between those two cost estimators when that 50% set or the 50% estimate is done. At that point, following a positive vote from town meeting and at the ballot, we would go into the bidding phase and then construction following that. So this is the site as it stands right now, the site design. The building was placed on the site basically to provide clear sight lines. So the apparatus portion of the building right here, the apparatus bays are right here. There is a large apron that the apparatus can pull out onto. This was set back from the street so that they could bring the apparatus back into the station and turn around on the apron to get back into the building without having to turn around in Route 20 and block traffic in any way. We set the building on the site so that the apparatus, as they were leaving, would have clear lines of sight going down West Main Street for safety. And all of the decisions that we made basically had something to do with safety and operations throughout the design process. We split up the parking so that there is staff parking in one area of the building. The staff can drive into the drive along this side of the building to get to the staff parking area. The public can drive into this driveway and get to public parking. There was a request from some of the town permitting boards to align the driveway here with the drive into Dunkin' Donuts, which just helps a little bit with movement here. So if a driver is coming out of the fire station driveway, they can make eye contact with a driver coming out of Dunkin' Donuts. They can coordinate movements at that time. So again, a decision that was made for safety. We also, in response to some of the permitting boards, extended the sidewalk from in front of the building down past the building and in front of the adjacent abutters at Hillside Grill to make it accessible going all the way down in front of the Hillside Grill. We also, in response to some comments from permitting boards, increased the height of the fence around the retaining wall. There is this retaining wall in the back of the property here that will retain the grades. There were some concerns about safety if someone were to get to the back of the site and walk along that retaining wall. So they asked that we increase the height of the fence running along the top of the retaining wall, and we did that. We also, or the Chief Parenti and Scott Charpentier, initiated a conversation with the folks who own the adjacent property over here to do some additional grading or regrading along the property line here, which would allow us to lower the height of this retaining wall, which would be a cost savings to the town. So those conversations are ongoing, and the engineers have been looking at that to try to bring down the height of this retaining wall a little bit as it extends along the west property line here. We've also increased some of the landscaping that was originally proposed in response to some comments from permitting boards. We've added some electrical vehicle charging stations in response to planning boards. And then a request from the town or from the fire department was to have some heated apparatus aprons. We put some snow melt systems under the pavement in front of the apparatus bays. That really helps to with snow clearing in inclement weather. It's just helps them get a head start on it and maintain some clear pavement in front of the doors to help with emergency response in the winter months. This is the first floor plan of the building. The first floor is divided up into 4 distinct areas. The pink zones that you see here are the operations areas that consist largely of the apparatus bays. There are doors on the front of the building. These are the doors where the apparatus can head out to West Main Street. These doors in the back here allow the apparatus to exit through the back parking area and around the building and out that drive. There are different support spaces adjacent to that for decontamination, for gear, for different storage needs for the fire department. The main entrance for the public is right here through the vestibule and into the lobby. There's a training room and some public toilet rooms located off of that lobby. And then there's sort of a lockdown here. There's a wall the public can't get past unless they're invited past. And that leads into the administration spaces for the chief, the deputy, the fire prevention officer, some storage spaces, and then some mechanical spaces. All of the gray spaces that you see here are building support spaces, including mechanical stairs. And those sorts of things. One of the things that was really important as we were looking at the design was this clean station concept that is really prominent in fire station designs right now. There's a lot of talk about how contaminants that firefighters encounter when they're out fighting fires gets on their gear, it gets on their bodies, they bring it back into the stations. And so you want to try to really limit the spread, make sure it doesn't get into the living quarters, it doesn't get into the administration areas, and that the firefighters have a way to come back into the station, clean their gear, clean their bodies, and decontaminate. So a lot of time was spent in figuring out how that workflow would happen when the firefighters come back into into the apparatus bays, they can go into this decontamination room where they can decontaminate things like backboards and gear. They can go into a couple of shower rooms here, take showers, bring their gear and their clothes into this laundry room to wash, or their gear into the gear room to store. And they can do all of that within this zone before they exit and go up the stairs to go to the living quarters or go through the corridor to go into the administration spaces. The second floor is largely devoted to the fire department living spaces. That's all of these green spaces here. We have 7 dorm rooms, which are located in this part of the building. There's the day room and the kitchen where they spend good chunks of their days. It's living quarters. They have their meals here. They can have downtime to watch TV. They can have small informal meetings here. There is a terrace located off of that where they can have some outdoor eating area as well. There are toilet rooms and shower rooms, a fitness area, and then another roof terrace off of that fitness area. There's some mechanical space up on this floor, and then there's also this training and hose drying tower. They do have hose that they dry. They can hoist them up and allow them to hang and dry, but they can also use this tower for training exercises, for practicing hauling hose upstairs, for practicing bringing stretchers downstairs if they were in a rescue situation, for those sorts of things. Other features for the buildings, the roofs will be designed to be solar ready. There aren't any plans right now to put photovoltaic panels on the roof, but they will be designed to accommodate the weight for the PV panels, and they will have conduit necessary to make those electrical connections in the future. That's something that is now required in the energy code. It's a recent requirement and something that we'll be adhering to. One of the other requirements of the energy code is to have spaces that are electric vehicle charger ready. And I mentioned before that we're going one step beyond, and we're providing some of those electric vehicle charger spaces to actually have the chargers installed when the building opens. I mentioned before the terraces and the tower, and then there's also a pole for fire response. So if there is a call and the firefighters are up on this second floor, they can either go down the stair here to get into the apparatus bays, or they can go down the pole here and drop down and get into the apparatus bays that way. This is a rendering of what the building will look like. We were asked to develop a design that had a traditional New England vernacular approach. So we looked at masonry. We wanted to pick a material that was durable, that had minimal maintenance concerns, and would be something that would be with the town of Northborough for a long time. We looked at different masonry that's in use through the town, and we came up with some bricks that were very similar to what we saw in other areas, and we thought really complemented the architecture of the downtown area. We were also asked to incorporate some arches into the architecture, and so you can see we have an arch marking the main entrance into the building. These are the doors into the lobby, and then the arches are repeated over the apparatus bay doors, and then there's a small arch that's repeated in the tower element here. We also have this clock element, which it lends some prominence to this tower and is a nice feature in the downtown area. Tim?
Thanks, Amy. So before we get into the numbers, just wanted to talk a little bit about what makes up the numbers and the costs. Typically, we refer to hard costs or soft costs that make up the total project budget or the total project cost for a project. So hard costs are the construction costs. It's the building, it's the work that needs to be done on the site to make it usable for its intended purpose. And as Amy said, when we went back in design development, we did have 2 estimators, and they went through a reconciliation process. So as we go through, those are the numbers that we're going to be looking at. Also, we do have the 50% construction documents out now for being looked at by the design or by the estimator. So we'll have updated numbers at the end of the month, early in September. The soft costs represent the other costs of the project. So it's the cost for the furnishings, fixtures, equipment. That's all the furniture, the related program-related equipment, everything else, all the loose things within the building, if you will. Fees and expenses, the design cost, the OPM costs, other moving costs or materials testing during construction. So some of those fees and expenses. And then the contingency, which is really the construction contingency during construction. So the construction and then an owner's project contingency. So that's really what makes up the numbers that we're going to be looking at on the next slide. And Amy, if you could go to the next one. So again, back on design development, we came up with a total construction cost of $33.4 to $34.1 million. We had some range also for furniture, fixtures, and equipment of roughly $750,000 to 1.35. Fees and expenses totaled $4.9 to $6.1 million. We added in the cost to acquire the site of just under $1.5 million. And then we have the contingencies that we're going to be carrying of 3.7 to 3.9 for a total range of a project cost of 44.3 to 46.9. There were some funds that were previously already approved of just under 3.5 million, which would mean a remaining funding that would be required of 40.8 to 43.4 million dollars. And just to go over quickly, next steps, we are going to be beginning the pre-qualification process. It's a dictated by Mass General Law of our process to develop a list of contractors who would be allowed to bid on the project. And we go through a pre-qualification process. We ask that they submit qualification packages and we review those and go through that process. Once that's complete, we'll have our bidders or filed sub-bidders and our general contractor bidders that can bid on the project. Meanwhile, the construction documents will be ongoing and wrapping those up. Again, we're at about 50% now, so those documents will be finishing up. And then, as Amy mentioned, bidding in the at the end of the year and groundbreaking construction beginning in early 2025.
Oops.
All right, who to break the awkward silence?
Amy, anything else?
No, I think that's it for our presentation.
Thank you very much. Any questions from members of the Appropriations Committee? George, you all set? Tim, any questions for you, sir? From you, sir?
No, I'm good. Thank you, Scott.
Great. And Bob, any questions for you, from you? No, he probably put up a hand or something like that.
He put up his hand if he had a question.
I just had a couple items and it's more informative. I've tried to track all the building committee meetings and follow along as best I can. One is just kind of the nomenclature. You mentioned cost estimates at or documentation that goes into the cost estimates at a 25%, 50%. For me and the folks at home, can you just kind of explain that concept of those percentage numbers?
So it's really 50% is the number. So there are three main phases for any design project, and that's schematic design, design development, and construction documents. So the schematic design is just what it sounds like. It's conceptual. We're trying to figure out what the building's going to look like, and we put together a couple of different options. We take all those program spaces, we arrange them, we run them by the committee. They decide, which direction they want to go in, and we settle on a floor plan at that point. And then we take that floor plan, we develop it into three-dimensional elevations, figure out what the exterior of the building is going to look like. Once that's agreed on, we've sort of finished schematic design. We've got the basics of what this is all going to be. At the same time, the engineers are looking at schematic level things. We're looking at the site, figuring out where the building's going to go on the site, where the drive's going to be, the parking area is going to be, big picture kinds of things. And then we do the cost estimate to get an idea of the order of magnitude of where we stand. From there, once that's approved, we move into what's called design development. And we're basically just layering details onto the project all along. We start to do some of the hard engineering, some of the hard detailing. We're coordinating amongst the disciplines. So architecture is working with structural, and we're working with mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineers, civil engineers, landscape architects, and we're all just adding more information to it. We get to a point where where we then call sort of the end of design development. We do this cost estimate, and once that's approved, we moved into construction documents, and that's putting everything in documents that the contractor can build from. There are drawing sets, and they are broken down into all these different disciplines that I just mentioned, architectural and engineering disciplines. And then specifications are, it's a book that's divided up into different categories of work that contractors can bid on. And for this project, you do the cost estimate and construction documents at different times. For this project, because of the timing of town meeting and wanting to get a number at town meeting, we sort of settled on 50%. It was the last point that we could get that cost estimate done and go through all the processes that you needed to do to get your number for town meeting. So we're roughly about halfway through the documentation process and putting that information together that will go out to bid for contractors to look at and put prices to ultimately during the bidding process. So hopefully, does that explain a little bit?
Yeah, thank you, because it was kind of 50% of what was my question. So at the time that you're going to be doing these estimating, this documentation process is about halfway complete, and you'll continue that work leading to the final bid documents, the bid packages.
Correct. Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. The slide mentioned that there were 3 bid alternates. Could you just describe those 3 alternates quickly?
3 bid alternates. Let me get the. So we had at one point, let me just get my paper here. I'm looking at the cost estimate while I talk to you. The 3 bid alternates we were looking at. So that was something that was done to give us an idea of a range of costs for the contract. And one of them was looking at the apparatus bays and whether we would have radiant heat in the slab of the apparatus bays. It's typically fire stations, when new fire stations are designed, they like to have radiant heat in the floor slab of the apparatus bays. But a question was raised from the Fire Station Building Committee of what we would save if we eliminated that radiant heat and went to a different system. And so that was one of the alternates that we priced out during design development. We found out it really wasn't much of a savings at all, and it did have operations implications. And so the Fire Station Building Committee elected not to take that alternate. The second alternate that we looked at was for roof monitors in the design over the apparatus bay. So the apparatus bay is quite deep. It fits 3 vehicles deep in the apparatus bays, and there isn't a lot of opportunity to get natural light into that space as a result. And yet it's a space that the firefighters are working in regularly throughout the day. And so we had proposed in the design to put what's called roof monitors in, and we had put 3 rows of them in. And it's a way, instead of having a skylight, it's basically a way to have a vertical window element up above the roof, which allows natural light to get into the depths of the apparatus bays. There had been some discussion about deleting the roof monitors, and so we had asked the cost estimators to give us a cost for removing the roof monitors entirely. In the end, after discussions with the Fire Station Building Committee, the decision was made to just eliminate one of those roof monitors, so we would still have two in the design. That would reduce some cost to the community, but it would also still give the fire department the operations benefits of getting that natural light in. And then the other alternate was a price for adding the solar panels at this time. And right now, that has not been incorporated into the project. We are making the roof solar ready, as I said, but we're not actually incorporating the PV panels into the design.
Okay, great, thank you. So at this point, we're not moving forward with those alternates, none of the three is what I'm hearing in terms of the package, or they will be as alternates and they'll be bid.
We reduced the.
The monitors,
from 3 to 2. That was the only change we made.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
We kept the radiant heat, yep.
And do the angle of the monitors, does that help with the solar panels as well? Because it aligns with sun alignment, so the monitors kind of help in that respect?
I mean, it maybe a little bit. You can still put solar panels on a flat roof. It does happen to be pointing in the direction of south, so they might have a little bit of a benefit, but I don't know that it's substantial.
Great. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Just following up on the cost estimates and the 50%. So what I understood is that 50% of the design documentation is done and you're doing cost estimates. How accurate is that? How accurate are the cost estimates? And are they likely to change once 100% of the documentation is done? Just getting a feel, because really it comes down to how good are the cost estimates.
Amy, I can speak to that a little bit if you like. So
Sure.
We have two cost estimators that we have looking at the documents. And what we want to make sure is that they're looking at the documents and they're taking it, the scope of the project away the same. So the thickness of the slabs, the pounds of steel, all the nuts and bolts that make it up, that they're looking at it the same way. They may not necessarily agree on cost, but we want to make sure that at least they're agreeing on the scope. And then they do talk back and forth. They're professional cost estimators. That's what they do every day. They tend to be a little bit conservative. They don't want to be, when they are putting together their estimates, they want to be in the middle of the pack. So if you have 5 bidders, they would want to come in right in the middle. They're not trying to be the lowest. They're not trying to put too much cushion on. But as they go through, as Amy mentioned, in schematic design, it's very early on. You're really just looking at a concept. Then you're going into design development where you have kind of the layout of the building and some of the big picture items, but you don't have those details. And so they have what they call a design contingency, a percentage built into their cost estimate. And as the design gets further developed, that percentage is reduced. So just like we won't get 5 bidders who give the same number at bid day, we won't get 2 estimators that give the same number at estimates. But this is what they do. We use them on a number of projects. They have a sense for what the costs are in this market, and we feel pretty comfortable that they'll be within, that this range is where the numbers will come in.
Okay, well, I guess another way of asking it is it usual to get your cost estimates when the documentation is 50% done, or is it usual to?
Let me jump in there, because it's not that the documentation is 50% done. The documentation went through the schematic design, then into the design development. Now you're building out those details. So it's 50% through construction document phase. So it's not 50% of the design, it's 50% of putting together those final details. So yes, there will be, then they anticipate that there's going to be a time between the design, or between the estimates when those are completed and when it actually goes out to bid. And we build in escalation into those estimates to account for that time. They'll also have potentially a small design contingency to cover that percentage of design that's still not 100% done or shown on those documents.
good on that.
Yes.
One final question. It might be worthwhile to bring up the slide that had the table of pricing.
Sure.
I was just confused. I couldn't tell if it was a subtraction or an addition, the line that was the site acquisition.
Subtraction.
And so it was
It was 3 million.
an additional subtraction. So, but both the site acquisition and the prior authorized funds were subtractions from the total. And I just, I missed.
Yeah, the range
math
of the
on that.
total project cost was 44.3 to 46.9. And then recognizing the fact that the town had already appropriated 3.499 million, that continued appropriation to complete based on this range would be 40.8 to 43.4.
So the site acquisition was added, but then the 3.4 that was already approved was subtracted.
Right, so I'm confused that the site acquisition wasn't
The all-in cost.
grouped with the previously approved as a previously approved
Yeah.
fund. That it reads, it's confusing to me that it reads, it's like, you're.
I've seen it so many times that
Yeah.
it's like, oh, I understand it. So the idea is to show you the total
Shows the-
cost of the system at 44.3 or 46.9, minus what was already approved. Because part of that 3.4 was the architect, part of it was site acquisition, part of it. So that, I think they just put the site acquisition in there so you saw what we paid for the site.
Right, but it was previously approved, so that's
I know.
that's what confuses me, that it would be listed down with the others and then wouldn't be in the
One is
range
cost
of
and
total
one is what's been
project
approved.
cost.
Yeah, the intent in this was that you had your costs, and then what's been the total cost, the 44.3. So those are all costs above. And then it's what you've approved or allocated to cover those costs. And so the costs that would be unencumbered yet or haven't been any money approved for that is the 40.8 and 43.4. But I'm not a finance guy, so it makes sense to me, but I understand if it could have been shown differently to make it more clear.
Yeah, and what was the funds for this current phase for design? How much was that?
You mean for the architect and for the OPM? or-
This work that we're doing right now in terms of total, so if we're gonna have site acquisition.
3.4999 was everything, that included site acquisition, that included
Okay, yeah.
architectural design, that included owner's project manager, that included, anything else I'm missing?
Test wells.
Test wells, it included borings, it included anything we had to do beforehand.
Yeah, so the slide reads
Yeah, I
to
know.
me correctly if the 3.499 includes the 1.49.
I got you.
Yeah, okay, I'm caught up now. It took me a minute to get there. All right, thank you very much. That's all.
Someone has a hand up? JR?
For financial planning, let's start with John Ray. Questions, please, John?
You're muted, John.
John, can you hear us? We can't hear you.
We may have lost him. Or he maybe said his signal was kind of crap.
Hey, I think, was that directed? This is John. Question. So you mentioned the two roof monitor. I hope I used the right words. 2 out of 3 are in the current number. Roof, is it monitors or modules? What's it called?
Monitors.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just I'm not familiar with the term. But how much are those that are in the plan?
I have to stop sharing here so I can actually take a look at the cost estimate. So when the last cost estimator or the last cost estimate did list them as what's known as a deduct alternate, so it would what the project would save if you eliminated them. And to eliminate all 3 of them, they estimated $438,720. So we eliminated one of them.
Okay.
So
So 2/3 of that. And then have you done analysis on the different operating costs? I was at a meeting prior at the library, and a very smart man that is knows this stuff way than I did, talked about the cost of that heating and cooling versus not having it. Have you looked at the operating cost of that?
Yes, so during the schematic design phase, the mechanical engineers did what's called a life cycle cost assessment. They looked at 3 different systems for heating and cooling the building, and they do this life cycle cost, which incorporates the first costs, what it costs to actually build the system, and then the operating costs. They look over, I think it's a 50-year period. They look at utility costs, they look at maintenance costs, having to change filters, the lifespan of different pumps, those sorts of things. And then they come up with what they consider the cost over the life of the building, or the cost over 50 years for the different systems. And so that was all presented to the building committee and helped them make the decision to go with the geothermal system. Part of what they looked at in that was rebates and what was available for state rebates as well as federal rebates. And that's how they made the decision to go with the geothermal, because it was the least expensive system over the life of the building when you took those rebates into account.
Yeah, and I was thinking more in terms of the operating costs of having a design that had no roof monitors versus 2 monitors. That wasn't very clear.
Sorry. No, that we didn't look at, no.
And another just cost question: how much is the pretty tower? How much does that cost to have that clock tower versus maybe not having it?
So when you talk about the tower, are you talking about just the clock feature, or are you talking about the whole tower?
The whole tower, because I think it has a couple of functions, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong. One is aesthetically looks great because it's a clock tower. The other is you have the fire pole that goes and it has a training aspect to it, right?
So the pole is not in that tower, and the tower is actually operational. We put the clock on it, but the tower itself is operational. It's where they dry their hose and where they do training. So it's an operational feature, and we have not actually pulled the cost of that one feature out in the cost estimate. I wouldn't know.
But do you have a detailed cost estimate that would include the cost of those things you just mentioned? Like I imagine maybe it's because it's only at 50% cost estimate now. I'm just struggling to understand why we wouldn't know the cost of that if we're doing a cost build up.
Well, they don't break out the cost estimate that way. It's not broken out by, sections of the building, elements in the building. So there's not something in the cost estimate that's just, this is the cost of the hose tower. They're looking at like a wall assembly, and they're saying, it costs this much to build all the brick in the building. It costs this much for all of the metal studs in the building. It costs this much for the concrete masonry backup and the insulation and those sorts of things. And those happen throughout the building. So it's not, broken down for this one hose tower itself.
Okay, and then just one last clarifying point for me is there a point in the process in which you do get to that point where you have like all of the things you're building and what the cost of each thing is, and it's very clear, and is it just we're early in the process and we're not there yet, or is that not an aspect that comes into the process?
So it doesn't come in that fashion. I guess if you're wondering if we're ever going to have a cost for what the hose tower is, or what the training room is, or what the day room is, we're never going to have it in that fashion. When they do the cost estimate, it is broken down into a lot of detail. But again, it's broken down, from a construction standpoint. They look at it. There are 2 different ways they look at it. One is known as uniformat, which is looking at systems. So it's looking at foundations. It's looking at roofing, and then it's looking at exterior walls versus interior finishes. And then it also is broken down by what's known as CSI format, which is looking at the overall cost of windows, or overall cost of doors, overall cost of structural steel, those sorts of things. But it's not broken down by like an area of the building or an element on the building.
That's something that might be done early in the process in the schematic design, when you're really looking at, can a fire station function on this site? What would it look like? How many square feet? And they would be more or less a square footage number at that point. Then once you go into design development, you start really putting some details in, and it's hard to break out a piece of the building. Then you have exterior building envelope. Well, how does that work? How does that go together? And it would be difficult for an estimator to determine that on their own without really generating a set of documents that show that. So those big picture decisions are made early on in the schematic design phase.
Okay, and I think did we ever do what sort of I mean, I'm fully supportive of a new fire station. Like what would a fire station would be if it was sort of met all the standards, safety, and everything else we did versus the things we may be choosing to do because we want to do them, whether they be for intentional for like better quality of life for firefighters, aesthetics. I don't think we've done that, right? I just want to make sure I'm clear on that. I think if we've taken the design and we've costed out the design in which we put together.
I don't know if I followed your question.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Well, I guess I'll try to say more clearly. There's a fire station that you could build that would meet all the requirements of a fire station built in 2024. And then there's one in which there's added things, whether they be like roof monitors, heating apparatus, clock tower, and just we don't really have anything that says, hey, here's what a base design would be and here are the extras. That's what I'm trying to get at, but I'm just trying to clarify that point.
Sure, I can address that, and simply there are no extras in this building. We've designed the building committee, and if anyone else with the building committee wants to speak up, we've designed the building committee based on what we need in the fire station, by the programmatic needs of what we need for spaces, what we need for operational. That's how this building was designed. It wasn't designed to say, oh, let's throw this in because it looks nice, or let's throw this in because we want it. It was based on what our needs were.
I would just add that the other intent behind the design and the selection of materials is that this is a 50-year building. So I think if I understand the question, you're wondering if there is a more economical way to build it and still make it functional, but the economy is as good as it's going to get for the most part if you're going to keep this building for 50 years.
John, anything else?
That's it for me.
Thank you. Scott Stockland, any questions?
I had one question, really, just not so much about the cost of the building, but in terms of when people are voting on this at town meeting, how can they determine how much it's going to cost them? We've all seen the number $344 for an average person. The reality is almost no one's going to pay that, right? Half the people in the room are going to pay more, half are going to pay less. So if someone is, let's say their current tax bill is 10 grand, is there a percentage that can be applied to that so people that are in the audience and are being asked to vote can say, oh, so for me, this is going to be $500 a year more, or so on and so forth?
Jason, I don't know if you want to answer that now or have a whole discussion on that, your choice.
Yeah, I think that there's some pretty detailed numbers that were put forward for the select board when there's the meeting on July 15th where we discussed it there. I think that the financial summit information has been posted online, and I think there's some fairly clear numbers in there that indicate a rate for that you could apply to your own property value if you need to. I don't know if we've stated it in an explicit way or not, but the numbers that were put together, we're using the estimates, the best estimates. The same estimates were used at the financial trend meeting, and I think the 344 number you're referencing would have been the average across 30 years to the average single-family home valued currently at 625 or whatever Northborough's current single-family home rate is. I don't know off the top of my head. That's the exact figure, but it's around 625. So the high year is somewhere around $472 because we have declining debt where as the principal is paid off, the interest reduces, so the debt payment reduces as we progress through the years of the debt. So the high year is somewhere between $472, and if the policy decision gets made at the same interest rate for 20 years, that it's about $100 difference. in terms of percentage-wise, top of my head, I don't know how to explain that better than saying that if you adjust up and down from that, it would be relative to that value of 625 currently.
Okay, I mean, I'm not asking for an answer now. I'm saying that when we go to town meeting and you're asking people to vote, we should talk about it in those terms, right? So the people that are in the audience can sort of look at their situation.
Get their head around it.
Mentally figure it out.
Yep. Jason, that's based on the 43.4 million, yes?
Yeah, I think the construction cost, like the next phase, I think we modeled 42.2 million.
Pick the middle spot.
But
Okay.
that was the current status of that.
Okay.
I think in terms of, not to refer people back to an old document, but the July.
Excuse me, Jason, the people are having trouble hearing you. Could you just grab a
Oh,
mic?
sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, so what I was saying was that at the July 15th meeting with the select board, there's fairly detailed numbers that were put forward in the packet. So if you look forward to the packet there, there is a projected debt table for 30 years for that would spell out the impact per year for those 30 years.
Yeah, I believe that's going to be posted, that'll be posted on the web, on the,
That's currently on the
it's already
website
posted,
now.
so they can go in, they can pull up that table and see, here's, if your house is worth this, this is what it is, based on, per year. And people would be, if they can go in and find out, they know the price of their house, but don't forget that changes too, right? So the price of their house could change.
Yeah, and just to be clear, we're talking about the assessed value of the house, not the market value.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, so at the financial trend monitoring meeting that we just had last week, or the financial summit, I believe that information is being posted online. The intent would be when we go forward to town meeting, I think that we'll ask for an update for what the interest rate climate is in the public debt market, and we can update people at that point. I think 4.25% was the interest rate used for the 30-year loan. For the numbers, I know that's what we used, but
I remember.
I think the indications are that interest rates may be coming in lower than that. So we may have good news to deliver to people at town meeting. But it's premature for me to say that now. But when we get closer to the town meeting, we will have all kinds of details.
Part of the presentation will be, will help clarify that during town meeting, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, you guys know what I'm asking.
Oh, fair, yeah, completely, makes perfect
Everybody
sense.
sort of gravitates to the 344, and they think.
Right, but if my house is worth $1 million and my house is worth 300, what's the difference? Well, no one's house is worth 300 in Northborough, but.
Yeah, I mean, people need to be able to look at their situation and kind of figure it out or estimate. Doesn't have to be exact. But
We need to set the expectation.
yeah, I mean, I think that's the right way to do it.
Just so you know, Scott, they're having trouble hearing you because you don't have a mic, I'm
Right.
getting texts from different people saying, we can't hear Scott, so let you know.
All right.
But I think Jason was able to sum it up, that should have helped.
Yeah, okay, excellent.
Bob Babcock?
All
questions?
set. Appreciate the details. Thank you.
Okay. Ken Picard?
I'm all set, thank you.
Susan Satori?
Yes, first of all, I'd like to say that I've watched a lot of your meetings, and I think that this is a really wonderful architectural firm you've been working with. I think they've given great guidance. I think you have great people on this committee. The two architects especially, exemplary. I think at times they helped you with some really hard decisions that at times they were more costly than you wanted to actually spend, but they took you to the right place. And I think that the building and the renderings that I have seen is absolutely lovely. I love the balance of where you have the meeting space and the home of the firefighters, separated by that tower where they train, to then where all the equipment is, where they run out to have to do the extraordinary things they do when they take a call. So I want to applaud you all, and I hope that we're going to be able to work with you for another year or so to finalize this and the people get behind it. I do want to ask one question in regard to the side retaining wall. You said there was a possibility of a cost construction. When will you have a better idea of when that is happening?
So the possibility was in lowering the height of the retaining wall, and that's something we have started to incorporate into the set. It is incorporated into the set that's going to the cost estimator. As you know, there's a retaining wall over at the Hillside Grill property as well. The overall site before either of those sites was developed, there was a slope there. When they cut into the site to build Hillside Grill, they had to build a retaining wall to retain the earth back there. On this site, we're going to need to do the same thing. And what it left was this wedge of land between the two properties, right along the property line, that was still high because of the way these retaining walls needed to be structured along the property line there. And so what the civil engineers realized was that if we didn't regrade along there, then we were going to have the wall of a certain height. But if we could regrade, it would mean going on to the property of Hillside Grill to lower their grade a little bit. But if we were able to do that, then we could bring down the height of that wall between the two properties a little bit. And so we approached the chief, and he and Scott Charpentier talked to the folks who own that property and said, would they be willing to allow contractors to come onto their property, lower the grade there a little bit, and it would take some pressure off of their retaining wall. It would mean that the retaining wall on the town's land could be a little bit lower, and they were open to that. So we've been able to incorporate that into the design and lower that wall a little bit.
Oh, okay, so it is kind of set.
Yeah, it's important to understand we're not touching their wall at all. So their wall will still be there. We're not touching that. It's from that area over towards ours. Instead of it's sloping it down so we can lower our wall, and it takes some pressure off their wall. And they have been amazing to work with. Like I said, I was mentioning earlier before the meeting started, they've just been terrific to work with. Sure, come on in. We want to work with you. We want you as great neighbors. We're like, you know, they were wonderful.
Well, I'm sure the approach and being so adaptable as everybody has been here, and as you've gone through the process, it was helpful that way. I want to understand better the money that's been used to get you to this point, and what money is actually left. And when people talk about, oh, could we eliminate this, or could we look at it from this point of view, there's a cost to asking the professionals to do those kinds of things. Can you tell me where we are in that budget?
Tim, could you tell us where we are in our current 3.49999 budget, which I don't think we have a whole lot of squeak room left in there?
Yeah, I don't have the budget up in front of me, but based on what we had on the table, we really have pretty much used up all of those funds. You know, there might be able to do some small, minor things, but I think we've either encumbered the cost or plan on encumbering up just maybe short of. I don't want to put a number out there, but within tens of thousands of dollars, not hundreds of
Let me
thousands of
give you an
dollars.
example of that. For instance, so when the committee decided to go with the geothermal system, there was a significant increase in the design dollars we had to spend, and there was an actual test well that has to be drilled that actually becomes part of the system. But that test well is fairly significant. It was a fairly deep well. We didn't have enough money to do that unless we made some changes to our schedule, which is why you see our bidding process got moved from before town meeting to after town meeting. The reason we did that is so we could take the money that had been designated for that bidding process and put it towards that design. So that's how tight we are, that we had to make that decision to change that bidding process so we had enough money to go forward with a geothermal design. So there's not a whole lot of extra money, and to go in and to change anything now would delay anything. Yeah, there's no money there.
Thank you.
Susan, anything else?
No.
I have a question and an observation. Tim, what is the current total project contingency as we're looking at it today? What percentage of the big pie?
Of the 44.3 to 46.9. If I have that, or I can pull it up quickly. At one point, I think we had it at 5 and 5 for the construction and owner's contingency, and I think we lowered it a little bit. Bear with me. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'd have to get back to you. I don't have a printout of it, and
Yeah, I actually think it was higher. I think it was higher, Tim, and then went down to 5. But for some reason that's sticking in my mind. I'm
That's
not
what
sure if
I,
that's accurate.
that's what I recall, Chief. That's what I was
Yeah.
asking. Okay.
Can I just, Janet here speaking, in our estimate, we owned a 5% design and pricing contingency still.
5%. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
but that's our design
Yes, that's the design and
contingency, not to
pricing,
be
yeah.
confused with our construction contingency.
Right, so it can come
Correct.
down.
Correct. That's just that one, so.
Thank you. The geothermal system that the committee has focused on has some rebates associated with it from the federal government and Mass Save to the tune of $1,938,000. I would like to see a memo from Tim to the Select Board, the Appropriations Committee, Financial Planning Committee, with copies to the Fire Station Building Committee, stating that when those rebates come back in, they're used to amortize the debt service associated with this project and nothing else. Can that be done?
Well, the intent would be never to have to borrow for this outstanding grant money. The intent would be that we would borrow in a way that these grants could be adjudicated during the last phase of the project.
So you wouldn't borrow 44 and then put the $1.9 million back in there? It's cash flow then?
Correct. We need the highest number is what would have to be authorized at town meeting.
Right.
But the spending plan, which shows most of the majority of the money being spent within 2 years, there will have to be a cleanup at the end of the project, because at the same time, we want to make sure we're borrowing enough money. We want to make sure we're not borrowing too much money. So the structure of the debt would play into us being able to adjudicate the remainder of these, like $1.9 million is what was estimated for the grants through the last year.
Okay. So the warrant article that'll have to be posted that the town will see will have the sum of what, 43.4?
It will have the highest, it should have the highest number.
Okay.
It will have whatever number comes back from the construction document cost estimate. Could be lower.
And we have to have that prior to town meeting on October 7th.
We have to have it prior to the warrant. Correct? Is that correct, Mitch?
Yeah, it definitely has to be there before we execute the warrant, which we're scheduled to do that, I think, the 9th of September.
Yeah.
We should have the dollar figure in there. I think the schedule is for the cost estimates to come back towards the end of August, and we've got a building committee meeting scheduled for, is it the 28th?
Correct. Yep, August 28th is when we have that.
Yeah, and then that's when the building committee will receive the consolidated cost estimate from the two cost estimators and the OPM and the architect. That will have its own range in there, and unless the building committee has any further decisions to make, and I don't anticipate us having any, I expect that the amount placed on the town meeting warrant will be the higher of the two of that cost estimate.
Correct. Yep.
Would it not be the reconciled value?
Yeah, there'll still be a lower and a higher. Tim, will there still be a lower and a higher, or will there only be one number when it comes back after?
After this next estimate?
Yeah.
Well, we'll have two estimates. So we can start off with a range, but if you want to lock in a budget that we target, we can do that too.
Okay. Yeah.
And I did just go back and look at the contingencies that we were carrying for the construction and owners contingencies. So we did start off with 6.5% for the construction contingency and lowered it down to 5%. And then the owner's contingency is 5% of the total project cost.
Thank you.
And those are of construction costs, not full.
Well, the construction
not real-
contingency is, now it's 5% of the construction cost. Owner's contingency is 5% of the total project.
Thank you.
So the charge of the Appropriations and Financial Planning Committees is to produce a report to the town to be presented at town meeting on this project. And since we have both committees here physically and virtually, most likely, I think we would want to meet separately with our respective committees to have a final discussion of this. And Jason, as with town meeting this year, you had worked to put together the language of that report, reports plural in this case. Have you made any progress on that or have any idea what that might be yet?
To be honest, no, I don't.
Okay.
I have not written any draft reports surrounding this.
Okay.
Or anything like that.
And I think, talking to Tim, he said we need to have that completed 2 weeks prior to town meeting. Mitch, does that sound right?
I don't remember the timing.
I think Tim said 2 weeks, but let's set the target of 2 weeks. So we need to get this done by mid-September.
So it would be a matter of scheduling then a meeting of each committee, fit it in, so I'll canvass the members on potential dates and work with staff on scheduling appropriations. And it'll be a similar process that we have for the other financial articles, right? Is that we'll have a report about our deliberation on that particular articles and a recommendation to make then to town meeting. And I'll work with Jason then on the draft report. So at that meeting, we'll have a draft, some draft report language that we can review and make any changes in that meeting and then have a vote on the recommendation.
Sounds like something we might be able to do remotely. We'll discuss it.
Fine with me.
Hey, John, could I follow up with your earlier question?
Please.
In our bylaws, we have a requirement that for special town meetings, we must send a physical mailing to every household in town 14 days before the town meeting. So I would suggest, work with the town clerk and make sure that after both of your committees have their votes, that you have adequate time to get that information to whether it be the town administrator's office or the town clerk's office, whoever assembles whatever that mailing will be, so that they can get it in the mail 14 days before the town meeting.
I think it would be informative to have that detail in the mailing that goes out to residents, that the recommendations from the financial committees. Great.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, that was my assumption. Thank you.
So for financial planning, I'd like to see us get some dates in the next couple of weeks, just to get it done and not be jammed at the wire. Okay. Scott, anything else?
Nothing more for us. I'm just writing the action items. We'll get some dates proposed, and then I'll work on that draft report.
Any other business? Chief?
I just wanted to give you some dates coming up, if that's okay.
Yep.
So as we mentioned, the next time the Fire Station Building Committee will be meeting is the 28th. We are starting the pre-qualification process, and Diana and I sit on that fun and exciting committee. By the way, cost estimates are really fun to sit through. If you've never had the chance to sit through a 4-hour cost estimate, it's a good time. The Select Board has a meeting, I believe, on the 12th. It's just not to execute the warrant, but to set the warrant. Is that correct, Mitch?
Correct. Yeah, we'll be. We've already opened the warrant. We will formally add the question about the fire station project to that warrant, and I think we will need one other unrelated article on the warrant.
Mitch, is that next week, August 12th or September 12th?
August 12th.
That is August
It is
12th.
August
Yeah,
12th.
we'll
Thank
be
you.
doing that next week. At that point, I don't know whether we'll have a dollar figure or just a sum of money next to that. And then at our September 9th meeting, if I have the date right, 8th or 9th, that's the date at which we will update the cost and execute the warrant.
Thanks, Mitch. The special town meeting's been set for October 7th, which is a very important day. As you all know, I think I've told you before, it's my birthday as well. So it's going to be a really good day. And then the ballot is in conjunction with the national election on the 5th. So I just wanted to make sure everyone had those dates in mind. Those are important dates that are coming up.
Chief, do you have any, Chief or Mitch, do you have any idea what would be on the ballot in terms of what are we asking people on the ballot?
Yeah, the ballot actually doesn't.
Approve the funding of the project, or?
The ballot does not have a dollar figure on it.
Okay.
It just says I approve. Correct, Mitch, if I'm correct?
Yeah, it is required from the Secretary of State's office relative to, the overall Prop 2.5 laws for a debt exclusion. And it's should be something like shall the town exclude from Proposition 2.5, so-called the debt service associated with the fire station building project. Jason would probably know that language better than me, but it's dictated by the state what it says, and the only thing you plug in there is the project.
So the number is set at the town meeting. It's got nothing to do with the ballot. The ballot itself, I shouldn't say it has nothing to do with the ballot. There's no number on the ballot. When people walk in to vote, there's no number on that ballot.
Got it. Thank you, Chief.
A town meeting is when the town appropriates the funds. It is going to be done subject to the approval of a debt exclusion, which will be in November. Then you do the debt exclusion that says anything that happens to be for the fire station project, whatever that number happens to be, it doesn't matter for the purpose of the ballot, gets excluded from the levy limit. We've already decided prior to that a month earlier what that dollar amount is by the town meeting hopefully approving it.
Okay. All right. Any other business? We have a motion to adjourn. So moved. Do a roll call. We'll start appropriations.
Scott is aye.
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 It's Tim.
Okay. Financial planning, John? John Wright? Still with us?
I'm still with you. Struggling with cell phone, but I appreciate it. Aye.
Okay. Scott?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
And John Rappa, aye. Meeting's adjourned at 8:13 PM.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Really appreciate
Thank
it.
you, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Good night.